Terry, and I wanted to show you my latest project. This is an RC model of the boat that was in the movie Apocalypse Now. Now the military calls those boats Patrol Boat River, or PBRs for short. So when I started this project, it made sense to start with a scale model of a PBR. Specifically, this is the Alpha Patrol Boat from ProBoat Models, and it's actually pretty good right out of the box. It's got a good outline of the boat, it's got a lot of scale details, it's got a nice power system, comes with the radio and everything you need. So really, when I opened the box for the kit, I was 80% done with this project. But after driving it in stock form for a little while, I identified a few different things I wanted to do to move the project forward. The first thing is I wanted to add some accents that would make this boat look a little bit more like a PBR that you would actually find in Vietnam. The next thing I wanted to do was add some details that were specific to the boat in the movie. And the last thing that I identified was to make some improvements that would help the boat be a little bit more user-friendly and reliable in the long run. So going to the details that would make this more like any PBR you would find, the first thing is to actually add crew members. While the kit had some details in it, it didn't have scale crew members included. The good news is that the boat works out to about 1/18 scale, and you can buy 1/18 scale military figurines. I bought this pack of 5 Marine action figures off of Amazon, and they fit perfectly. I just had to do a little bit of painting to make them look more like a PBR crew. Now the next thing that I decided to do to make the boat a little bit more realistic was to give it some weathering and some paint details. Out of the box, the boat looked like a factory fresh PBR, and the real boats just didn't look that way for very long. So I mixed up a few different color paints to give the overall color a little bit of a mottled and sun-bleached appearance, and I also used some paint washes to make other areas look dirty. So nothing huge, but just a few little accents here and there. A scale feature that I think is really cool is the sound system that I installed in here. It's the Mr. RC Sound version 4.1 system, and it's really just 2 components. It's a controller card which has electronic files of engine sounds, and then there's a transducer. And the card plays those sounds through the transducer, and with the transducer glued to part of the hull, it basically makes the whole boat a speaker. So you can actually hear the sounds from pretty far away. And what you get are emulated engine sounds that change with your throttle settings. And the last thing I did was to add a servo to this forward turret. And that's a feature that's incorporated in the kit. They just don't include the servo, but really all you have to do is drop one in there and connect it to the turret. And you can make it an independently controlled turret if you wanted to, but you would have to change the radio. I ended up changing the radio anyway, but I didn't want the overhead of controlling that separately, so it's slaved to the steering channel. So when I steer the boat right or left, the turret moves with it. And that's really the easiest way to do it. And when it came to making this boat look specifically like the PBR in Apocalypse Now, there were really only a couple of things that I focused on. The first is doing the lettering that's on the back of the boat. You've got the boat name Erebus painted on the back here, and also canned heat on the shield of the rear machine gun. And they're really kind of minor accents, but it's something you have to do if you're trying to emulate that boat. Now, the biggest feature is right here. It's the improvised roof over the wheelhouse. You may recall there's a section in the movie where another PBR is passing by. They toss a smoke grenade on their canopy, the canvas canopy, sets it on fire. So the crew ends up making their own improvised roof out of bamboo and vegetation. So to emulate that here, I thought in the beginning that I would just be buying some off-the-shelf scenery that you can buy for model train sets. Turns out you couldn't find what I was looking for, or I couldn't find it anyway. So what I ended up doing is using real bamboo to emulate the bamboo. I just took bamboo skewers and split them down to a smaller diameter. And then for the leaves, I ended up using feathers from the craft store and painting them in different ways to look like the palm leaves. And I think it turned out pretty well. My goal when making the boat more reliable and user-friendly was really in 2 areas. Number one, I noticed early on that this particular model takes on a lot more water than my other boats. In particular, water would pool up back here in this kind of tub area, and also there would be a lot of water inside the hull. Now back here, that was easy enough. Really, I just drilled 2 holes, one on each side through the transom, and that allowed the water in here to drain out. Now there's a little bit of a gap between the inner wall and the outer wall here, so I used drinking straws to make a tube, and that worked very well. So that was an easily fixed problem. For the water getting inside the hull, I had a hunch that it was coming in through this front turret. The turret is open in the bottom, so any water that would splash up here would just drain straight through into the hull. And there was also a gap between the turret and the deck, and I thought water might be getting in through there. So what I did is I closed off the bottom of the turret with some sheet plastic, and I made a little skirt that goes around the turret to block off that gap. So I thought between those two I would seal off any water. Now I've run the boat since making those modifications. Turns out my hunch was probably wrong, because even though this is now closed off, there's still a considerable amount of water getting inside. I need to look at that closer and figure out where the water is actually coming from. It's not too much of a concern because the electronics inside are waterproof, but there's really no reason for that much water to be getting inside. The next area I wanted to address was the boat's handling. It had a tendency to spin out if you were driving at high speed and did any sort of aggressive maneuvering. Now you could tone that down a little bit by reducing the steering throws and also having a light touch on the steering wheel, but I wanted to see if there was something I could incorporate to make it a little bit more tolerant of ham-fisted driving. So what I ended up doing was adding a turn fin that I made out of sheet aluminum. Now this is a common feature on other boats, but there wasn't one on the real PBR, so there wasn't one on the scale model. Now it makes a huge difference in the driving. Actually, when I had 2 turn fins on here originally, it was too stable. So I went back to 1 fin and then ended up reducing that more and more until I got the handling I wanted. And the way things are now, the boat's stable most of the time, but if you really get aggressive with it, it'll still do the spin out, which is a scale maneuver and it's sometimes fun to do. So that's a high-level overview of this project, the boat from Apocalypse Now. I've written 3 articles on this topic. The first is my review of the original box stock boat, and then I've broken down my detailing of the boat into 2 areas. One is the cosmetic changes, the other is the mechanical changes. You can find all of those articles on tested.com, and I'll have the links in the description below. So thanks for watching.